Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Let's get started with our conversations on CARICOM. We're happy to be joined, as always, by Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Comissiong. Ambassador Comissiong, good morning to you.
Morning, Pearson. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us as always. We always look forward to this exchange with you and our conversations on CARICOM. And imagine, in the midst of last week, our counting and recognizing the 12 outstanding achievements for the year, a British newspaper was misquoting you about Barbados' approach to reparations. Let's start there. What is the CARICOM Barbados campaign on reparations, and what is in it? What is not in it as well?
Yes, well, what happened last week was that this British newspaper put out a story suggesting or claiming that Barbados was pursuing a reparations claim against an individual by the name of Benedict Cumberbatch. Apparently, Benedict Cumberbatch is a very famous UK actor.
Yes.
I think he starred in 12 Years a Slave, and he plays Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
In some dramas. And so this story went viral. and my name was caught up in it because they were basing the story on an interview that this journalist had with me. This journalist actually came to see me at my office to interview me about CARICOM reparations campaign. We spent well over an hour. I mean, I gave the journalist chapter and verse, and I didn't have a clue who this Benedict Cumberbatch is. Our National Task Force on Reparations has never discussed a Benedict Cumberbatch. So it was just so strange that this was manufactured virtually out of the blue. And so clearly, somebody was running as they say, running a red herring across the trail. So yes, and I had to issue a press release to clarify that indeed Barbados has never issued any reparations claim against anybody by the name of Benedict Cumberbatch. Barbados is part of the CARICOM reparations campaign. So we have not made claims for reparations separate from CARICOM. Whatever the CARICOM claim is on behalf of Barbados and the other CARICOM countries. And back in 2016, CARICOM sent official letters to 6 European governments claiming reparations. And those governments are the governments of the UK, France, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and Denmark, six governments. And basically what the letters said, the letters outlined that particular country's involvement in both the genocide of the native people of the Caribbean and African enslavement. It said to them that damage had been done as a result of those criminal activities, that CARICOM had put together a 10-point plan, reparations plan, designed to help repair some of that damage. And it invited the European government to sit with CARICOM and to discuss what role they could play in helping to repair some of this damage. So that's the first component of the campaign, directed at national governments. Subsequent to that, CARICOM acknowledged that in addition, there were European companies and institutions that were implicated in enslavement and that should also be making reparations. And this was not surprising because several of these companies have in fact admitted that they are implicated and have acknowledged that they have a responsibility to make reparations. So you're talking the Bank of England, Lloyd's of London, the big insurance and banking company. You're talking the University of Glasgow, which has actually already made a reparation settlement with our UE to the tune of £20 million. So that's really the Barbados and CARICOM reparations claim, national governments, companies, and institutions. Now, our national task force on reparations, in addition to that, we have been looking at the Drax family of Barbados and looking at the history of the Drax family and their direct involvement in enslavement and the continuity of the family through almost 400 years. They still operate the Drax Hall plantation right here in St. George. The National Task Force felt that this family should also be asked to make a reparations gesture. But the National Task Force cannot determine these matters. So the National Task Force has passed on its recommendation, its suggestion to higher governmental levels. So the government of Barbados will ultimately determine whether we take on board the proposal of the task force that the Drax family be presented with a reparations claim. So this is where the situation really stands. I would say that we are making progress because not only do we have the example of the University of Glasgow, an institution actually making a reparations payment, in a sense, to the University of the West Indies, but in December of last year, we had the Prime Minister of the Netherlands stepping forward and making an official apology and, in a sense, an admission of liability on behalf of the government of the Netherlands. This is something that when we wrote to him, CARICOM that is, in 2016, his response in 2016 was very, very different from what he said on the 19th of December. Back in 2016, very non-committal. By last year, by 2022, he was admitting guilt and liability on behalf of his government. So we are making progress, Pearson.
What I'm reading you to say is what is not. I'll tell you what it is first. It's a campaign to leverage against governments, companies and institutions. What it is not is a campaign against individuals. Am I reading you correctly?
Well, yeah. Well, okay. Let me give you an interesting example. In 2021, a British woman by the name of Bridget Freeman, having become aware of the horrors of enslavement, and having become aware that to some extent her family had married into a slave owning family in Barbados. She felt moved to make a reparation gesture, and she actually in 2021 bequeathed $1 million to our University of the West Indies. And when she made that bequest, this is what she said. And I'm quoting Bridget Freeman. She's a British woman in her 70s. She said, quote, "It is about reparation. We owe it. Once you see the ships of the slave trade, the giving back just seems so obvious." End of quote. So here is a person out of a sense of moral duty. Once they become aware of that history, saying, "Look, we have to do something," and so, but they and in that sense, everybody who has a moral conscience and who recognizes the historical injustice really can come to the table and make a similar reparations gesture. But you're correct. CARICOM and Barbados, we have not targeted families. We have targeted the governments, and we have targeted the institutions. But the approach of CARICOM is to say, whether it is a government, whether it is a company or institution, it is to outline the history. And the history is so clear, Pearson. The history is so clear. For generations, our ancestors were enslaved, were forced to work. The fruits of their labor, they did not get to enjoy or keep any of the fruits of their labor. The fruits of their labor were all siphoned off the European families, European companies, ultimately to European nations. Tremendous injustice. Europe was enriched, European families were enriched, companies were enriched, and we are saying to everybody, look, you must have a moral conscience. This is the injustice. We are inviting you to acknowledge that injustice. Many of these nations, they say that they are our friends. They say that they are our development partners. So we are inviting you to acknowledge that injustice and to make a gesture of we have not even gone the route of taking people to court. We have said, look, our preferred course of action is to approach you in a reasonable and moral way and say, let us sit down, let us discuss this, and let us see what role you can play in helping to repair some of this damage. So we in the task force, we believe that where you can find clear cases, not just of institutions now, but a very clear case where you can actually trace a family through the centuries, and it is actually it becomes clear that the wealth possessed at present has a direct link to those centuries of exploitation, that we should be able to say to that family, look, this is the history. We invite you to come to the discussion table. Let us discuss what role you can play. And I think this lady, Bridget Freeman, is an excellent example of a moral individual, who has actually led the way and set an example that hopefully others will follow.
For a lot of people, that moral compass is broken. And the hope is through the campaign that we do appeal to some sense of nobility to be able to say, you know what, we've done wrong, let's fix it as well. So I know I can't ask you to read the mind of anyone, but what would possess the journalist to actually misquote you in the kind of way to suggest that there was a move afoot to approach Mr. Benedict?
Well, I would not want to interpret the actions of the journalist, because of course you can never be absolutely certain. But I do know that to win the battle for reparations, and obviously it's a struggle, because as you say, quite often people don't just simply do the right and moral thing. Sometimes they have to be pushed to do the right and moral thing. But so very important part of the campaign for reparations is cultivating and winning over the conscience of the people of countries like the United Kingdom. In other words, we need the mass of the British people to be saying, look, we are with these CARICOM governments and people. We recognize that injustice has been done, and we are saying to our government, yes, this is the right thing to do. Now, if you give the British people the impression that CARICOM countries are simply involved in some kind of very radical witch hunt against British families, you could actually alienate the mass of the British people from the reparations campaign. So we have to be very careful about this, and there's absolutely nothing about our campaign that, if it is truthfully and objectively presented to any European population, would cause them to be alienated. So we have to be very careful that persons do not use propaganda to sully our campaign. So I really felt for Mr. Benedict Cumberbatch. As I told the journalist, when the journalist asked me if Barbados was pursuing a reparations claim against Benedict Cumberbatch, I said, I don't know who this Benedict Cumberbatch is. I mean, I subsequently learned about him being an actor. And the journalist used that answer to write a story that says Barbados does not rule out pursuing a reparation. Imagine, you are the one, you bring to me the name. You said, is Barbados pursuing a reparations claim against Benedict Cumberbatch? The response is, I don't know who Benedict Cumberbatch, so I really can't speak about anything to do. And you then write that up as Barbados does not rule out. And then having said Barbados does not rule out, then it goes on, other publications go on to say Barbados is, so I mean a total concoction. So I really felt for this gentleman, because somebody was obviously just using his name, really knowing that this is a popular personality. Somebody was using his name to carry out some kind of mission. So we don't need that. Our campaign is very clear. It is very factual. It is based on the undoubted historical facts about crimes and injustices that were done and that need to be addressed. And Pearson, whenever I get the chance to speak to governmental figures from Europe, I am very clear with them. I say to them, look, this reparations claim, don't believe that you can just stall and this will go away. That is not going to happen, because the genie is out of the bottle. Because of social media and advances in mass communication, our people are now aware of the history. And and you can't hide this history anymore. In fact, with every passing day, more and more of the history is coming out. And therefore, Europe needs to acknowledge that history. Europe needs to acknowledge that, unfortunately, it was involved in serious crimes, and that it hurt many peoples and many parts of the world. And Europe needs to make an effort at acknowledgement and atonement, so that going forward, these relationships could be put on a more noble and elevated level. If Europe fails to do that, and people feel that Europe, having done an injustice, is simply thumbing its noses at them, this is going to poison relationships in the future. So reparations really is about accountability. It is about atoning for injustices, making a goodwill gesture to help repair some of that damage, apologizing for the injury that was done, and building new and more humane and mutually respectful relationships going forward into the future. And so reparations really is at the heart of what kind of world community are we going to have?
Yes.
What kind of international relationships, what kind of relationships between people are we going to have going forward into the future?
A solid point on which to end our conversations this morning. Thank you so much, Ambassador Comissiong, for clarifying, for setting right, for setting straight what it is that the CARICOM Barbados Reparations Campaign is about. And here's hoping that it's sounded abroad that clarity is repeated as well. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure, Pearson. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Barbados Ambassador to David Comissiong explaining further the Barbados CARICOM reparations campaign and what it is, and most of all, what it is not.